Hi everyone. Just a short note before our episode begins. Our featured playwright John Minigan has a bunch of productions coming up that you can go see. His short play Family Planning will be part of the off-Broadway run of the #MeToo plays at the Alternative Theater in New York City through December 9th. Hejante Productions will be producing Breaking the Shakespeare Code in the spring of 2019 here in New York City. An Actors Studio of Newburyport will have two of John's short plays in the January New Works Festival, and a production of his full-length Noir Hamlet in 2019.
Boston Podcast Players is supported by a grant from the Bob Jolly Charitable Trust.
Boston Podcast Players.
The story thus far.
Cast of characters.
Empress of
An
Rome.
entity or demon.
A run-of-the-mill Polish guy in his 40s.
Setting.
In a small hut
A
in the
long
city of
forgotten
Beijing.
era that lives both in the
Act
past.
1,
We
Scene 1.
create the
Possible.
world with the stories we tell about
Act 1,
ourselves.
Scene
Because
2.
Steven, he could
Act
be anywhere,
1,
right?
Scene 3.
Don't give up the ship!
Cannon fire.
Bianca pushes the stop button. The end.
Welcome everyone to Boston Podcast Players, Boston's virtual podcast stage for new works by local playwrights. I'm Greg Lamb, the host of the show, and today I'm joined by my co-host Brandon Crose, writer, editor, playwright, and creator of the upcoming podcast, The Ordinary Epic. Brandon, what can you tell us about The Ordinary Epic?
That it'll hopefully be out at the end of this summer. I believe this episode will be dropping in the fall, you thought, this September-ish. So fingers crossed, it'll be live at that point. It's a full cast audio drama about 5 friends who overcome challenges, both ordinary and epic. If you're a fan of gaming, you'll love it. If you're not, I contend that you'll love it anyway. It's it's the first story of this type that I've seen. That the reason I wanted to write it is there are stories about gaming, but none, at least that I'm aware of, where.
And when you say gaming, are you saying role-playing games?
Yeah. So like Dungeons and Dragons, although not explicitly Dungeons and Dragons, copyright lawyers. A game much like Dungeons and Dragons. So each episode is a story told across the two worlds, right? As a person in this world, what can't you express about yourself, about the world, that you can as a fictional persona you created?
And you're going all out with production with sound effects and such? Or?
Oh, yeah. No, we went way overboard. It's a full soundscape, original music.
Wow.
It's going to be epic.
Wonderful. Now, we brought you in here today to help us discuss our featured playwright, John Minigan, and his Eugene O'Neill Award finalist play, The Queen of Sad Mischance. You have been in writing groups with John for many years, I understand. Can you help set up the excerpt we're about to hear?
Yeah, so this is very early in the play, if not the actual very beginning of the play. So scene 1 in any case. Kim, with a Y, is in a sort of unconventional interview with someone named Beverly, and I won't spoil the rest, but there are twists and turns and playful banter galore.
Queen of Sad Mischance, a play in 2 acts by John Minigan. Cast of characters. Kim, 21, biracial with a black mother and white father, an intense, focused English major, reluctant to open up to others about herself. Beverly, 55, white, an energetic, driven feminist Shakespeare scholar beginning to be affected by early onset Alzheimer's. She tends not to finish her sentences, especially in the first act. This isn't because she has lost her train of thought, but because her quick mind has moved on to the next idea. Roy, 28, white, Beverly's son, an actor. He's left a graduate-level acting program to move home and become his mother's live-in caretaker. Scene, Beverly's disorganized home office, a desk, a couch, chairs, and small tables, bookcases. Most surfaces are covered with books, notebooks, folders filled with newspaper. An outdated iMac sits on Beverly's desk. Hanging prominently in front of a bookcase is a print of a 1455 Talbot master portrait of Margaret of Anjou receiving the Book of Romances. The 9 scenes cover the span of the 2014-2015 academic year. Act 1, Scene 1. Early September, Kim sits on one of the only free surfaces with a folder in her lap and her bag on the floor beside her. Beverly moves around the office continually, coming to rest only occasionally as they speak.
It's not just a reframing. It's telling a different story. And nobody's telling the Margaret story.
I know the tragedies better than the history.
You're an English major. They teach you, what, Ophelia? Even in a woman's college, they tell you she's out of her mind. No. Ophelia makes a choice. She drowns herself in a fucking brook.
It's not clear she's making a choice.
Not clear to English majors?
The text can be interpreted in more than...
She fucking well drowns herself, but they taught you, what, an accident, mischance? And not just the men. Inside the play, Gertrude starts it. Says Ophelia should have a Christian burial. Fell in because a branch broke. Her clothes got wet. And everybody knows once her clothes get wet, you're shit out of luck and you're going to drown. You think it's an accident? You think a weak branch is what? This isn't David fucking Mamet. The priest won't bury her in hallowed ground because she did it with intention.
But Gertrude and the priest disagree, so it's ambiguous. The priest might be wrong.
Of course he's wrong. He's a priest. But that's not what he's wrong about. She makes her own decision about life and death. That's why he drowns her. He can't allow a woman with agency to enter the gates of heaven.
What do you mean he drowns her?
What?
You said the priest drowns Ophelia.
No.
The priest doesn't drown.
Did I? Oh, shit. Of course he... Kim, if you take this job, you have to know I'm going to say things that aren't right. I'm going to do that. Increasingly, that's the disease.
I understand.
It's the amyloids and the peptides and this tea, the plastic mug. You ever drink tea in a plastic mug? It isn't warm, it isn't cold. But lately, I misjudged distance, and a couple of weeks ago I put my china cup down on the table here, and I missed the edge. So, plastic mugs.
I have some experience with...
The priest doesn't drown her. I mean, he doesn't bury her in hallowed ground with ceremony.
Because she claimed power over her own death?
A fucking priest is not going to let a woman get away with that.
Okay, but he believes suicide is a sin.
You're Catholic.
I was raised Catholic.
But then you got to college.
Pretty much, yeah. From his perspective, suicide...
You've got to decide whether what they teach you is true, whether you accept the story. It's your responsibility to make that choice.
Okay.
They teach you Ophelia because they can spin that story. But Margaret, you see this?
She indicates the painting in front of the bookcase.
Margaret of Anjou, 15 years old, engaged to Henry VI. John Talbot's giving her the Book of Romances in honor of the engagement. The first two chapters, Alexander the Great and Charlemagne. You get it? Talbot got it. He knew what she was capable of. Here's your book, Margaret. Open it up. You can be an Alexander. You can be a Charlemagne. Or look to your right, and that's your future. The king who's going to lose his mind and lose his power. The choice is yours. Ophelia's convenient.
Convenient.
To teach girls in high school. Margaret, who chooses for herself, is not convenient.
Men have always controlled the narrative.
Fuck the men. I'm talking about academia. I'm talking about the caretarchy.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
It's a broader term. Beyond oppression of women by men, it's about the white, male, Christian, heteronormative.
You mean intersectionality?
I mean caretarchy, which is why I use the term. We have a word that works. We don't need... My point. We create the world with the stories we tell about ourselves. Here on the edge of... The old power structures are finally starting to fall apart. But academia is holding on to the story of woman as victim. This book about Margaret, from Henry VI plays and Richard III, nobody can say she's going to step on a branch. This is going to change the story. You see?
How much do you have on paper?
If I had it on paper, I wouldn't... It's in my head. It's in the notes. It's in...
She gestures at the room.
This room, this office. And my brain has a fuse, all right? Fuse is burning. If you feel like you're comfortable with that.
I have some experience with...
Alzheimer's.
With dementia.
Go ahead.
My great-grandmother lived with us. She had diabetes, only she didn't really like doctors.
Okay.
At one point, her leg got really infected, so, between the toxins and the pains, she made a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
She didn't always know who I was. She confused me with my mom.
You look like her?
I do. Hold up.
Kim gets a picture out of a wallet in her bag.
And your mother lived with you?
No, she wasn't with us.
Your father?
I don't really know him. This is my mother.
Beverly looks at the picture.
It would be easy to get confused.
She had me when she was 17, but she didn't have the ability to... She wasn't what you'd call reliable. She would say stuff we all wanted to hear, but you kind of knew you couldn't trust any of it. I lived with my grandmother. She had my mom young, too. She's the one that pushed me to be different, break the pattern, work hard, come to school here, even though it means,
Loans.
Yeah.
This is important to you.
My grandmother told me to keep the picture with me, like a reminder. I might look like her, but I'm not going to be her.
Good.
Beverly gives her back the photo.
So, I have a level of comfort. You seem pretty clear.
No, what did I say? Something about the priests?
Drowning her?
You see what I'm up against. 55 years old, supposed to be entering my intellectual prime, but this fucking early onset, and it's a little foolish to use words like legacy and the work one leaves behind the world when you spent so much of your life in an ivory tower, I know.
But your Wilding Women book was kind of a watershed. It changed the way we look at the characters in the late romances.
You think that's a watershed?
It was for me. Reading it in first-year seminar, it's like a seminal text.
Think you mean foundational?
Right.
That's the problem. It's been absorbed into the foundation, but it's the foundation, the core story, that has to change. That's what this book is going to do. You see? Change the story we tell about ourselves.
Right. Wow.
And it's going to be a brain dump. I'm not going to get it written on my own, so I need somebody brilliant and ambitious.
I brought a resume.
Kim gets out a resume and hands it to Beverly.
Here.
Kim, I don't give a shit what's on this paper.
Okay.
Sally, Professor Benditson says, I make lists now. There's a yellow legal pad somewhere.
That one?
She says you presented at an undergrad conference last year.
Right. She's going to be my honors advisor. She thinks I can turn the presentation into an honors thesis and maybe an article.
I see.
About the death of Queen Elizabeth led to a new image of the female body in the Jacobean theater.
Oh, fuck. Don't do that.
No. It can be an article to submit after the death of Elizabeth and the return of male rule. The female body was once again...
What did Sally have in mind? Departmental honors? Maybe an article? A recommendation from her?
If I can get the piece published, then grad schools...
Grad schools, right. A master's, a PhD, and eventually a teaching gig. Maybe even a nice Seven Sisters school like this.
That's what I'm...
Professor Benditson is a smart woman.
She is.
But you're going to fail.
How am I going to fail?
An article on... What did you say?
The image of the female body after...
Oh, you're going to fail. 30 years ago. Don't write the article.
I already enrolled in senior thesis research.
Work for me instead.
Right. I figured I'd do my work study here while...
And wait a year on grad school applications.
No. If I don't go to grad school next year, I have to start paying back the loans.
The deck is stacked against you. A black girl from Brockton trying to stake her claim in academia.
My mother is black. My father was white.
That makes the deck less stacked.
No, but...
A bright young woman from the projects wins a national merit scholarship.
I didn't grow up in the project.
Beyond the lip service, do you think academia is holding the door for you, eagerly awaiting? Schools like this, it's harder to get in every year, and once you get in, you have more loans than grants because they're circling the wagons. You've got loans.
Mine, and then my grandmother had to take out some additional.
And then more loans for the master's and the doctorate. And then you won't get a tenure track because nobody gets a tenure track. So you'll end up at an adjunct at some third-rate, teaching kids not half as smart. Sally should know better. What you need to do, drop the thesis, spend a year with me, rebuilding the female narrative in Western culture.
That seems like a lot for a work-study job.
You'll get your work-study money. You can work over breaks.
Semester breaks?
Christmas, spring break, whatever. I'm on leave this year and I have money. What I don't have is time.
I don't want to move back to Brockton next fall for some nothing job while I pay off the loan.
Then work here after graduation. Once you're applying, a year from now, there'll be editing, when they send out the proofs, the galleys. Who knows what I'm going to be capable of at that point.
Just so I understand. You want me to drop the work with Dr. Venelston, the thesis, the grad school applications?
Well, let's not fuck around, okay? You didn't come here today because you give a rat's ass about me or the book or Margaret of Anjou or Shakespeare's early histories. You came here because you know a job as a research assistant to Professor Beverly Norton will look a hell of a lot better on a grad school application than flipping burgers in the dining hall, right?
Okay, yes.
We have this myth. The right individual, if she's smart enough, works hard enough, has every qualification, then of course she will rise. It's bullshit. The old structures are dying, so they are circling the wagons and making it harder than ever to get inside. That's why this book matters, to shake the foundations. So if you want to be a part of this...
She gestures around the room.
If you want to end up someplace like this, you better have help on the inside.
You want to do that for me?
I've got to get the book written, and that's going to take somebody smart and ambitious.
That's not really what I'm asking.
Smart. Why do I want the black girl to work on this? It's not white guilt, if that's what. You got yourself this far, which means you have ambition. Every indication is you've got brains. You understood what I said about Ophelia.
I do.
And you corrected me about the priest.
You were confused about...
I need to write this book before it drowns in the amyloids and peptides, and I need an assistant smart enough to recognize when somebody's actually going to hold the door open. So what I'm asking is...
Okay. When do we start?
End of scene. Act 1, Scene 2. Late afternoon, 2 days later, Kim is reading through the articles and making notes on her laptop. We hear the sound of Roy saying, "Que sera, sera." Kim stops and listens.
Will we have rainbows day after day? Here's what my sweetheart said. Que sera, sera. Whatever, whoa, the fuck are you?
I was about to ask you the same thing.
Were you, though?
Don't say Doris Day.
So we know you're cultured.
Who are you?
I asked first, and I believe I live here, so you have to tell me.
You live here?
Did you hear me? I heard me.
I work for Beverly.
How long have you worked?
I start today.
What happened to Becca?
Becca?
Becca. 3'4" by 3'4" by 3'4". Oh, right. Beverly got to be too much for that squat little Becca. So now there's you. And you are...
5'6".
Cultured and clever. I meant your name.
Kim, with a Y. What do you mean you live here?
The scion. The fruit of her loom. Roy Norton. Pleased to meet you, Kim, with a Y.
He lies down on the couch.
Hold up. She didn't tell me she's married.
Beverly Norton? Married? Are you shitting me?
So how are you...
In the late 1980s, when the newly conceived idea of gestational surrogacy was taking hold on the uterine walls of American society...
Got it.
So not technically the fruit of her loom. She supplied half the young. Too much information?
Maybe. Roy. As in King?
Never underestimate Beverly. Leroy Edward Norton. You met French Margaret here in the painting. Her son Edward was supposed to become King of England.
Leroy Edward. King Edward. I get it.
She's always had a sense of humor.
And that makes you a white guy named Leroy.
And I'd like to point out, I'm not always in my current condition, but we had a matinee today. A school matinee at 10 a.m. in the morning for 75 middle and high school students who had no fucking idea what the play was about.
You're an actor.
Cultured, clever, and quick on the uptake. I see why she hired you. Two Gentlemen of Verona, set in the early 60s, Ken Kesey, Electric Kool-Aid, Mary Prankster style, and the director and sound designer, ironically, It's a production that drips irony, that oozes irony, that bleeds irony from every pore and orifice, used only the selections from the Doris Day songbook. I'm not sure the sixth graders fully appreciated every level of resonance. One of the Facebook savvy amongst them asked if this was a throwback Thursday to the Magic School Bus. After the matinee, a liquid lunch, and home for a nap seemed like the best palate cleanser before tonight's show.
Well, Leroy.
Roy, please.
Roy, it's lovely to meet you.
Well, the pleasure's mine. Are you on the clock?
She went upstairs to rest. We worked 2 hours this morning so I could start getting familiar with the materials. It's not really my area.
Not really into Shakespeare.
That's not what I
You're
said.
probably more a Langston Hughes kind of girl?
Langston Hughes.
Or like Zora Neale Thurston?
Hurston.
Hurston. Are you sure?
Why not Shakespeare?
Just, he's like the ultimate out-of-touch white guy.
You came in second?
Whoa! Wow. Okay. No, I mean, you're the one who said it's not your area.
Early histories. I've been mostly focused on the late romances.
And how do you, no offense, know Doris Day?
Gay friends.
Right.
So, I've got a little early history reading to do before I can tell where everything stands.
First impression, then. Where does everything stand?
There's a lot of material. There's a year's worth of notes.
Cultured and clever and not a fan of direct statements.
I'm an English major.
How about an educated guess?
If you insist on a guess.
As the progeny of a notable figure in feminist literary theory, I would never insist you express an opinion. But I recognize that as part of your independent personhood, you possess a highly individuated, but not necessarily gendered set of values, and I'm curious what you fucking think.
I fucking think it's overwhelming. Not just your attitude.
Can you turn this into a book for her?
With her. I wouldn't have taken the job if I didn't think so.
Cubic little Becca took the job. That lasted less than a semester until she realized it was a task beyond the reach of her stunted little arms, which were probably average length.
So you're asking, has the disease progressed so far?
2 English majors.
There's probably enough here for 3 books.
Then where are the books?
Wilding Women was landmark in feminist Shakespeare.
She published her dissertation so she'd get tenure.
She's written articles.
And where are the books?
Enter Beverly.
Where, what books?
Hello, Beverly.
What are you doing in here?
Making Kim's acquaintance.
We're working.
I'll leave you to it. Is there anything that I can...
Leroy,
Just asking if there's anything I can get for you.
let us work.
Happy to do that. Nice to meet you, Kim. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other.
Thank you.
Don't be an asshole, Leroy.
How am I being an asshole?
You're not going to keep us from working.
Why would I keep you from working?
You can go.
I sure can. Hey, I apologize if I said anything that makes me sound like an asshole. Maybe it was school. Maybe it's the alcohol maybe drowning the synapses in my brain. And
Enough!
it probably is. I'll see you, Kim.
Right.
Roy leaves.
I didn't know you had a son.
We've had to establish ground rules. This is my office. I mean, for the purposes of work, it's ours. You belong here, he doesn't. And you can tell him that.
It'll be a little bit strange for me.
You can tell him.
He's an actor?
He's a dropout. 28 years old, and he threw in the towel in graduate school. And that's enough about Leroy. How are you doing? You feeling at home?
Starting to. You have a lot of material here. I wonder if maybe I could, you probably put this all together according to how you see things, but
what?
I worry about how long it'll take me to figure out how it's organized.
And that's fine.
Organizing is one of the things I'm best at. We can probably figure out how.
I know where everything is. You'll figure it out as we go.
Okay.
The first thing you need to do is get familiar with the plays. First, second, third, Henry VI, Richard III.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is paid work, by the way, reading the plays.
That's not necessary.
You wouldn't be reading them if you weren't working here. Take them one at a time, and we'll discuss.
Becca Lehrman worked for you last year?
Leroy told you?
Yes.
You'll do better.
She's a strong writer.
We didn't get that far. She's a friend of yours?
Not really.
You'll do better. Now, I have a copy of 1 Henry VI for you to look at.
I can read it online.
Read my copy. I made annotations.
It's no trouble if I...
You need to hold it in your hands, Kim. You'll read it here. It's part of your time.
Nobody's ever paid me just to read before.
Welcome to academia.
Beverly pulls a text off a shelf. It's the wrong book.
Shit.
She holds on to the book.
It is a hardcover or...
It's the Arden paperback. Edward Burns edited. He's just a little obsessed with the dates of production, which seems absurd to me. Just give me a moment.
Beverly looks in the couch cushions, then stops.
There's flowers on the cover.
Okay. Is it more likely to be on one side of the room or the other? Or like on the shelves as opposed to the table or the desk?
Just give me a moment.
When did you last see it?
Becca must have it. I'll email her.
Let me try to message her and see.
Kim gets her phone and messages during what follows.
Messenger? You said you're not friends.
Facebook friends, not... We're in Dr. Bendelson's first-year seminar, but...
She must have borrowed them. These are my annotated copies. Who knows what else she's ended up taking?
Okay. I'll send it. In the meantime, I can read online, and when you get your copies back, I'll read your annotations. I should get to my afternoon class.
It's a cautionary tale. Don't let people walk off with your materials.
I'm fine just reading them while I'm here, if you're worried.
Oh, no, Kim, that's not what I... Please don't think I said that, because...
No, I wasn't suggesting...
Because I would never...
Of course not.
Okay.
Kim gets a notification.
Okay. Becca says she doesn't have them.
Well, shit. They're my annotated... Is she certain?
I can ask her.
Kim gets another notification.
She says to check in the tray on the computer desk.
Beverly goes to the table.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
She pulls the book from the tray. She has a book in each hand.
Thank her for me.
Will do.
Beverly watches Kim send a message.
All set. I should get to class. Don't worry about the book.
I want you to take it with you.
I'll read it online tonight and look at the annotations next time I'm here.
You're back?
Thursday, 10 o'clock.
Beverly puts both books on the arm of the couch.
Maybe, I'm sorry, but if you kept it in the same place, in the tray by the computer, we'll both
I'll remember where it is.
Absolutely.
Another notification arrives.
Becca says, no problem. I'll see you then.
Thursday.
That's right.
We'll discuss the play. Margaret arrives right in the end, in Act 5.
I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you Thursday.
Yes.
Kim leaves. Beverly picks up both books. She puts the copy of 1 Henry VI back in the tray on the computer table. She walks to a shelf to return the other book. It's the wrong shelf.
Oh, Jesus.
She goes to another shelf. She takes a breath and swallows hard. She goes back to the computer table and takes the copy of 1 Henry VI out of the tray. She puts it back in the tray. She takes it out. She puts it back.
1 Henry VI in the tray near the...
She takes a step back toward the shelves with the second book. She doesn't know where to put it.
Fuck!
She throws the second book on the couch. She goes back to the computer table and puts her hand on the copy of 1 Henry VI. End of scene.
Hey everyone, just an audio note. We recorded the interview section in my basement, which we don't usually do, and it wasn't as quiet as other venues we've recorded in. There were some little kids running around, and you'll, as a result, hear some banging and shrieking in the background. And I want to assure everyone we were not in a haunted house. I repeat, not in a haunted house. Our featured playwright is a teacher who has just retired from a distinguished career as a high school teacher at Weston High School, which means he now has more time to devote to playwriting, so look out. His work has been workshopped at New Rep, the New American Playwrights Project, and other places. He's a member of Right On Group at Centastage, along with our co-host, and he's been a finalist for major awards such as the aforementioned O'Neill Award and the Actors Theatre of Louisville Heidemann Award. And perhaps something we can discuss out of my personal nostalgia, he twice brought his high school students to wins in the Massachusetts Educational Theatre Drama Festival, which is a huge deal in my book. Now, welcome to the podcast, John Minigan.
Thanks, Ray.
Great to have you here. So let's begin with the play we just heard an excerpt of. Tell us how you wrote The Queen of Sad Mischance.
I find that I can't really get started on a play if I have a single idea for it. It's if I have a pair of ideas that don't necessarily match, kind of the energy of those two ideas creates the energy of a play for me. And in the case of Queen of Sad Mischance, I've been fascinated by Shakespeare's Queen Margaret character for a very long time, and I knew that I wanted to write something. I thought, maybe I'll write a one-woman show about someone preparing for the role of Queen Margaret in all the 4 plays that she appears in, or maybe I'll do a contemporary riff on Margaret and what she would be like now. So that was sort of in the back of my mind. And then my daughter had an experience when she was in college working with a scholar who had brain damage and working on a large project with her, and coming to realize over the course of many days working on the project that the project was really never going to happen. And that her role was as help, as comfort to the scholar, rather than, we're not really going to write this big book sort of thing. And for my daughter, who is biracial, I think that for her there's that sense of, is academia this white world that I'm sort of really interested in? Is there a place for me, and do I really want to be in that place? So those 2 ideas kind of came together. And the writing was interesting. I normally think about plays for a very long time. So I've been thinking about this for a little bit of time, and I sat down one night to just take some notes and think about structure and characters, and suddenly the first scene more or less wrote itself. I mean, it was very quick. The characters popped into my head and started talking to each other very, very quickly. And then the rest of the play was, of course, a nightmare to finish.
That's how it always goes.
It is. I think this one's going to be easy. And then,
So your daughter got off easy. She was only in that situation for a few days, right?
That's well, it was interesting for her because it was, one of the things that happens in the play is that as Kim gets more and more involved in Beverly's world, the sense of what their relationship is begins to change. Beverly says, when you graduate from college, you can just move in here. There's a room on the 3rd floor, and we'll work together more consistently. And that is an offer that the scholar made to my daughter. You can just move in here after you graduate. It'll be great. You have a built-in job. And on the one hand, thinking about graduating from college, it's great. I'll have a job and a place to stay. But on the other hand, as she realized she was not there to do what she thought she was there to do, it became a very unattractive option.
In the play itself, situation seems laid out right ahead that the scholar is well aware of her decline, and that this will be quite a flowers for Algernon type situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It seemed more interesting to me, among the many changes between my daughter's situation and the dramatic situation in the play, it seemed much more interesting if the disease were going to be progressive rather than static, and if Beverly were aware. The fact that there was a fuse that was burning, and at a certain point the bomb was going to go off, and she would not be able to work anymore.
Yeah, and you see her gradually diminished by this in ways that she predicted, but still, when it comes, it's devastating to witness.
Mm-hmm.
That's what really struck me about re-listening to this clip last night was that she is bringing in someone to help her, but at no point does she ever surrender control.
Right.
Where, she really resists Kim's attempts to make plans, to organize things. Mm-hmm. She needs to keep that all in her head, even as she does say, on the other hand, that there's a fuse in there, a ticking time bomb. Right. So it's like, how else is this possibly going to end for her?
Right.
But she just won't.
And she won't. And she lays out at the beginning that really the only way for Kim to succeed is with someone like her helping her, because, in academia, they're circling the wagons and you can't get inside, and it's harder and harder. And it takes a very long time for Kim to realize that Beverly is also circling the wagons and not, she speaks the language of inclusion, but that's not really what she's offering Kim at all.
Right. One thing I noticed looking through your play history is that you have written a lot about maybe academia or just learning settings and the classics of theater as it pertains to academia. Does that seem to be a theme that runs?
True. Yeah. I for most of my high school teaching career, I taught Shakespeare or directed Shakespeare a lot, and so those stories are always sort of in the background for me. So it's not surprising that have I written a full-length play that doesn't riff on Shakespeare? Yes, I have, but not one that's been produced or garnered tremendous interest. So I do feel like that sort of cultural background, and I dip into those bigger stories that are sort of part of the wallpaper, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And because I've been in academia, I think I've done a lot of thinking about academia and power dynamics There's a play, for example, Easter at the Entree Gold, that's about two teachers stuck in a hotel room in Montreal. And I started writing it when I was the age of the younger teacher, and it took me about 20 years to write it, to really finish it. And I was about the age of the older teacher. So I think that play really has like the career's worth of perspective, I guess, about what academia is like to kind of live inside it every day.
That brings me to a related question I have. So as a teacher, you have to present yourself a certain way to the community as an upright, respectable, et cetera, et cetera. Have you ever had like an outraged parent drop a copy of your 10-minute play, It's the Jews, on like your principal's desk? Or like, how do you write what you write, which is like very adult, not salacious, but like adult, adult situations and adult language, but also be like a public school teacher?
Yeah, it's interesting. Our administration asks us via email to share good news when we have good news. And I know It's the Jews is one of the first plays of mine that got multiple productions, and I always had to sort of give let me give you the synopsis as I tell you what this is really about. Sometimes there's a hell of a title. And I know that when Easter at the Entree Gold was performed up in Newburyport 6 or 7 years ago, was interviewed by the local paper up there. And one of the questions was, does your administration know about the content of this play?
Well, now they're retired. The gloves are off.
The gloves are off. That's right. And so I guess it's that old saying of, plays are not about good people doing nice things.
Right.
So that's not really that interesting.
All right. I'm going to steal that when I get in trouble.
Yeah.
Later in my career.
Do you want to give the micro synopsis of It's the Jews?
Sure.
For our podcast audience.
It's the Jews. It's another of those plays that was two separate ideas that came together. I saw an absolutely terrible Holocaust play. And it seemed to be written by the playwright to garner interest and make people think like, oh, what a great, wonderful, adventurous playwright, rather than deal with the subject matter as valuable subject matter to explore as humans. And I started to think about questions of, when you write about great human tragedies, what's the artist's responsibility? You have to be egoless. You can't be doing it for yourself, because that writing then becomes an immoral act. So that was part of it. And then the other part is I had a play workshopped. It was an adaptation of an old Gothic novel, The Castle of Otranto. And the artistic director of the company sent me the poster that they were going to use. This is a play, Castle of Otranto. At the end of it, a father stabs his daughter through the heart. The poster was a colorful castle with big white puffy clouds and a pretty blue sky. And I was like, this is not the play that I wrote. I think I understand the play that you want, but it's really not my play. And when I got there to actually go to rehearsal, that became very clear.
Oh my God.
So I had the idea of somebody who's with the best intentions writing a Holocaust play, and the artistic director of a theater company who wants to stage the play, but just with a few changes. Like, all the characters in the play are Jews. Let's not do that. And so the playwright has to confront why am I writing this in the first place? And can I remove all the characters that I'm writing about just for the sake of finally getting a production? And that's
a subject matter dear to any playwright. So.
Yeah. How much do you compromise? Yeah.
You said Queen of Sad Mischance has gotten a lot more attention on the sort of awards circuit than you've experienced before, right?
Yes, yeah. It seems to be moving in a good direction, and I know personally that there are things to work on, but I'm in the middle of 4 readings or presentations over the course of about 5 months. First was at the Massasoit New Play Festival, where it had a rehearsed staged reading, and then there was the Depot, from which the excerpt was recorded. In 2 weeks, I'm going to Dayton Playhouse in Ohio for Future Fest, where it'll be one of 6 plays that gets staged there. And then I'll finally get to rewrite, because none of those organizations wanted any revision. They wanted the script that I sent them. So I've been compiling pages and pages of notes for what I want to work on next. And we'll do that in Dayton, and then it's going to be up at Page to Stage in Roanoke, Virginia in November, hopefully in a brand new and maybe closer to finished draft. So yes, people have been interested in it, which is great. It was the piece that I submitted to the Mass Cultural Council and got a finalist recognition from them.
And the O'Neill, right?
And the O'Neill, yeah, which, I don't know, like many playwrights, I suspect, you submit your play to the O'Neill in the hope that you'll become a semi-finalist. And so it did, and that was great. And then I was just blown away by the fact that I got the finalist email. I was not expecting that, but that was very nice. and it was a finalist at Kitchen Dog Theater in Dallas as well. So those people have said nice things on the New Play Exchange about it, and so that's good. I'm hoping that it keeps people interested enough that when it's in a producible form, someone will be interested in staging it.
In terms of staging, it's a very budget-friendly script. There's 3 people. There's 1 set. There's no pyrotechnics.
Right. There's water, but there's no
water. Yeah.
And I wonder to what extent it's not a surprise to me that the play of mine that has been staged the most, as in more than once, is a play with 2 actors in a rehearsal hall.
Right.
And that's the one that everyone wants to do. It's very easy. So I don't know to what extent I should have specific instructions about, so this is how you could do water if you really can't do water. Pouring down the walls of the set.
Well, you're not exactly shy about staging requirements, though. I'm remembering several drafts of a play called Little Ant Renovation.
Oh, yeah. Which is more drafts in process, yeah.
But I seem to recall knocking a wall down, or perhaps the 2nd floor onto the first.
Yeah, the ceiling collapses.
Yes,
at the
right.
end of the first act.
Yes.
Yeah.
So your Angels in America moment.
Very, without the angel. Yeah. Just collapsed ceilings. Yeah, I'm working on that currently, and trying to figure out how in the world I avoid, having the ceiling collapse at the end of that one. Because nobody will do that.
Yeah.
So you recently had a play up called Noir Hamlet.
Yes.
Which seemed to be a lot of fun.
It really was. The genesis of that play, I wrote a 10-minute noir comedy a few years ago called The Maltese Walter that's been produced more than anything else that I've ever written. And Paul Melendi, who's a great actor in Boston, played the leading role in it at the Boston Theater Marathon and said afterward, why don't you write a full length? Take this 10-minute play, expand to a full length. And I said, you die on page 9. I don't know where I go from there. But I kept thinking about it. And again, because the wallpaper of my world is Shakespeare, I kept thinking about, is there a Shakespeare play that would work as a noir? And of course, Hamlet leapt to mind immediately. So I was very excited that it got staged in Boston recently and that Paul was available and interested to play Hamlet. And it felt like this is what that little 10-minute play was leading us toward.
Now, that was something I had been looking for, just as your example of a short at the Boston Theater Marathon or any 10-minute format.
Right. Being
explicitly the stepping stone to something larger. It never happened to me or people I've asked, but that's an actual concrete example of one. Yeah,
it is, and it's very plot wise, it's completely different. But it was that idea of a comic noir world to explore, and it was again, this is going back to Little Ant Renovation, which may have a new title, the play about the dead kid.
Ooh,
because
I like it.
Yeah, that Joe, who directed Noir Hamlet, keeps referring to the play that way. What about the play about the dead kid? So I've been working on that, and it's the hardest thing I've ever written, and I know that this draft is not going to be it either. I sort of throw it out and start it again every summer. So I'd struggled with that for much of the summer of 2016 and said, I just need to write Noir Hamlet now. I need to take a break from this intense Little Ant Renovation, or the play about the dead kid is about what happens in the 2nd and 3rd generation in an immigrant family. There's all of this drive and energy, but also a desire to assimilate. So then what happens when assimilation has occurred and the drive is no longer there?
The nostalgia that follows.
Yes, yeah. And the ceiling collapses.
And speaking of summers, I know while you were teaching, you were a self-described summer writer, which you put to good use, I would say. You wrote you wrote more some summers than I did the whole year, which is what I find is when you have a condensed amount of time,
right?
There's that urgency and that momentum that you can build. So now that you have nothing but time to write, the question is, will you be writing more, the same, or much less?
My fear is much less. I have the same worry. I think that I've been very productive in the summer for the last few years because I always had that sense that, I'm running full speed toward a brick wall of September. So I need to accomplish as much as I can, as quickly as I can. And I'm a little concerned about that right now. Fortunately, there are enough things coming up that are giving me structure. Well, I have, 2.5 weeks before I go to Ohio, and after which I can work on Queen of Sad Mischance. So I'm telling myself that means that's the only time I have to rewrite Little Ant. And I'm hoping that sort of thing continues. But I'm also, I think it would be a dangerous thing to just retire and do nothing. So I'm looking for enough part-time gigs that I'll feel like, oh, I really better get some writing done because I'm about to get very busy.
Right. With these gigs I lined up for myself.
Yeah, I can envision myself just spending the whole day on social media drinking coffee and sitting in my pajamas and never accomplishing anything, because I've done a little of that this summer so far.
Don't get too used to it.
Right.
So I want to talk about your relationship with Boston as a creative city. I think you've had a lot of different relationships with different entities around town. Like, the writing group you're both in, right? And then New Rep and other places.
Right. Yeah, the writing group has been terrific for me. It's a very low-key, very informal group. It's run by Centastage.
What was the name of it again?
It's called Right On.
Yeah.
And Centastage is the group that produced Noir Hamlet. And Joey Antoon is the artistic director. He's also the facilitator in the writing group. And they produce a full length about every 3 years. So it's rare for them to produce. And mostly the writing group I know that there's a meeting coming up on the first Monday of the month, so I better produce some pages, or I'll feel guilty just going and sitting and listening. So it keeps me writing, and it's great. It's a very flexible membership. There've been a lot of new members in the last year, which is great, and a lot of people who have a lot of energy, which is terrific. So yeah, I've been involved with them for really 5 years this fall, I think.
Do people just show up and say, hi, I want to be involved? Or?
Yeah, pretty much. Put me on the email list. So I don't know how many hundreds of people are on the list, but I'll keep
people like me who were very active at one time and then continue to receive the emails, and every so often go, hi guys. But
or I'll mention something to a playwright and they'll say, oh no, I saw that on the Right On list. I'm still on the email list. So yeah, I've been involved with them. I was in unfortunately the last group of Next Voices Fellows at New Rep. That was a fantastic program to be involved with, run by Bridget O'Leary. And I'd applied several times sent several scripts in, and Queen of Sad Mischance was the first one that made it. It was also the first time that I wrote during the school year, just because we would have a deadline of every 2 to 3 months to do a complete new draft. If we wanted to. Sometimes it was, I just want to work on Act 1, and that was okay too. But it was great to move from table readings with Bridget and the other two playwrights, Ellen O'Brien and Walt McGough, and then Ruth Spack, who came in as a dramaturg and sort of a literary ear. And then by the second half of it, to have actors coming in and have actors read the script and discuss. It was great, and it pushed me a lot. The people in the group were tough on me in the best possible way. That say things like, oh, the arc of Act 1 is really interesting. It's 4 scenes. It should be 5. And the 2 months of struggling to pull apart the house and rebuild it as a 5-story house rather than a 4-story house. And having done it and have the reading and have everyone say, yeah, that really worked well. Now your 3-scene Act 2 is really 4 scenes. And having to dive back in and work on that. But the pressure of it, and especially at the end, going into rehearsal with actors for the public reading and having to produce new drafts really, really quickly and solve problems quickly. I was very happy with seeing what I could do under that kind of pressure. That was really good. And then I worked with, the group isn't producing anymore, Vagabond Theater Company. Back in 2014, they did the Boston production of Breaking the Shakespeare Code at the Factory, the wonderful old space that is no longer.
Yeah. Good old South End real estate renovations or changes. Yep.
Apparently now it's a gym or a fitness room in that condo. Something
like that.
Yeah, it's just a shame.
We can just stage plays right in the middle of the fitness floor.
That's true. Ooh, script idea.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of aggressive writing deadline, last year I finally persuaded you to join me in attempting 31 plays in 31 days. Have you heard of this or tried it, Greg?
I've heard this. I don't think I would try it.
Let me tell you.
It's one of those, I'll try anything once kind of things. So.
I guess that answers my question. You said you were struggling with motivation a little. I don't know. Maybe you might want to try it again this year.
So the idea of 31 plays in 31 days is you literally write.
Yeah, well, I mean, ideally you're trying to write a play a day.
If you're me, you write a play a day.
Right.
If you're Brandon.
If you're Brandon, you write a couple plays, you get some false confidence, and then you blow off the rest of the month until the last 10 days. And then you write between, and then you write between 3 and 7 plays a day. And then collapse from exhaustion.
It was a great exercise, and it does that I don't know if it did the same for you, but I got to the point somewhere around the 21st or 22nd when I thought I would be completely out of ideas, and instead everything became an idea for a play.
Yeah.
No matter what I looked at. I was like, well, the play about that would be...
Right.
not the good play about it, but the play about it.
Well, because you're so hungry for ideas.
Right.
They just come out of anywhere. Yeah.
Now, are you fed prompts for every day, or is it just...
They do either on the blog, or they used to send them via email, but I think now it's just on the blog. They will send like, a picture or like a couple like things to think about, which you can ignore or not. I mean, it can be totally just self-directed or...
Yeah, I think I didn't use any of the prompts. And I mean, it was a great exercise. It's frustrating that my percentage of success, 31 plays produced, 31 plays were written, only one has been produced in the almost year since. Despite the fact that I think there are a few that have potential, and I know that what I suggested I may do this year is do another 31 plays in 31 days, but the same 31, and go back to each one and spend a day reworking. Because you get so exhausted by the end of the day, you're like, oh man, finished, done, close the laptop, never come back to it. I'm happy with the one that's been done. I think it probably is the best of the 31, but I don't know, I really hope somebody does an emoji named Desire. Somebody should do that.
I will
only for the title.
Spend the rest of my professional career making sure that happens.
Now I want to go back to your previous day job, as I've been doing some math. You had been teaching at Weston High School for 31 years.
Yes.
Which means you started there in 1987.
Correct.
Now, I was in high school at Marblehead High from 1988 to 92.
Yep.
During which we went to the finals of the High School Drama Festival twice.
And Weston went 0 times in those years.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So I was wondering, because they don't have archives of showing what was where, whether I had seen your work 30 years previous, unless we saw you in like the regionals or whatever.
No, we only competed in about 4-year or whatever stretch. I think we only competed twice. But we didn't start experiencing success. The first time we went to finals was 93 with a production of Much Ado About Nothing, and then not again until 97. And then from 97 until I stopped doing the competitive festival, we were more successful. And I think it really coincided with, I was teaching at Weston High School and middle school, and so trying to run a program in one building while teaching in two. In 97, that's also when they began the renovation of the space and actually created a space to work in. So it was no surprise that the program started to take off at that point, when they really started to create the infrastructure physically and also the sensibility. At one point, I was teaching 6 different classes per quarter. So 6 different preparations while also running the program in 2 buildings while trying to run the program. And it was crazy. And my kids were born in 91 and 94, so it's all like... That was a little wild.
You weren't writing much at that time.
And I was not writing very much, or nothing from that era has been produced, except that play that took 20 years to write, which I started in 95. I guess it was 15 years and finished it our first was on stage in 2010, even though it wasn't in its current form.
And you say that the plays you brought to the festival were devised with your students?
The last 15 years or so, starting in 2002, I had seen a lot of really good devised work. It was just called workshop pieces at that point from late Ian Ryrie, who was at Brookline at the time when I first started seeing his work, and Steve Bogart, who was at Lexington High School. I was just blown away by the work that they were getting kids to create. So I did took a workshop with the 2 of them, and then jumped into trying to do it with the plan of doing it for festival every other year. And by the second time we did it, the kids were saying, like, we need to do this every year. This is great.
Now, when you say something's devised, what is it? What does that entail? How does that work?
So I would cast a group of about 18 kids based on improvisation and re-improvisation of scenes that they had witnessed each other improv. And then would give them usually a fairly vague prompt. One year it was Lost and Found. Like, that was the prompt. Go create scenes about Lost and Found. Kids would go off for 15 minutes, create a scene, come in, perform, and then we'd discuss what ideas seemed interesting, and basically do that for 3 weeks. At the end of which you say, so what were the characters, situations, ideas that kept coming up or that really grabbed you? And then spend about 3 weeks trying to shape a play, create a structure, create a scene map for the play, and then script, which kids do completely on their feet. So they would, in the early days, they would script and our stage managers would type on laptops as quickly as possible. Then later they would record everything and the stage managers would go away during the next session and transcribe. And then I would assemble from the multiple transcriptions of we did 5 versions of this scene, how to create a beat structure that really works for it. was great for me because I learned a lot about structure. I also learned how easy and important it is just to throw out stuff if it's not working, because there's always going to be more stuff. So I became much less precious about what I had written.
Plus, you're in the festival, you have a strict time limit.
And there's a time limit in the festival, especially if you're competing. We stopped competing after 2014 just because the problem with being successful is that, if you're a coach and you get into tournament and you keep advancing, they give you more pay. If you're a one-person drama teacher running a program, they just give you more stress because you have to still carry your load. You have to, in my case, also begin directing the musical while you're still keeping a show on the road for up to 4 weeks and multiple different venues. And I realized that it made me angry at the kids all the time. And I said, you know what? Let's go non-competitive and really just do the work. And they said, can we keep devising? I said, yes, we're going to keep devising. And then we started traveling to non-competitive festivals, which was much less stressful. And those festivals are, I think, much more educationally sound. It's about the work and seeing what's going on and kids talking to kids without a sense of evaluating, but just understanding, how did you get to that point? What was your process like?
Didn't know there were non-competitive high school drama festivals.
Yeah, you can go with the festival that the Guild runs. You can enter as a non-competitive school, which we had done a couple of times really early. I think in 90 and 92 we were non-competitive. And then I said to my kids, we can keep going to festival, but we're going to go non-competitively. And in fact, the Guild at that point wanted to have a separate non-competitive festival called the Massachusetts Theater Celebration. So the same group that organizes the competitive festival, we've been hosting semifinals for years. So we started hosting the non-competitive festival instead. And I much preferred it.
Now, have any of your students gone on to careers in theaters that you know of?
Yeah, unfortunately. So
You're to blame.
I am to blame that their parents are probably paying no
parents of Weston. Send your letters of complaint.
A number of people have. I've been following a student of mine, Christine Barclay, she runs the Boca Black Box in Florida, which is many of her students who come to her program are students from Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School. That was the place that they were doing a production of Spring Awakening when the Parkland shooting happened. Oh, wow. The work that she was able to do with them, there have been a couple of documentaries and New York Times covered it. The work that they did that really focused on why is theater really important for these kids as a manner of self-expression and a way to process the things that they've been through. So yeah, there are kids a lot of kids who are teaching. The person who's coming in and taking over my position is a former student, which is great. And she's been a theater teacher at Westboro High School for several years. And then, kids who are in the field, doing stand-up, acting, doing film work, stage work. I feel bad about it. Living more comfortably, have they become accountants? But
well, maybe one or two got out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think the last question is one thing I hope that happens to this podcast is that people who listen will actually look into working with the featured playwrights. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, what is the phone call that you'd most like to get from someone listening to this podcast?
Ooh. So let's get together and have coffee and talk about when we're going to produce your play. That was the wonderful thing with Noir Hamlet is about a year ago. Joe approached me, I think, after a meeting and said, I think we should do one of your plays and send me a couple of them.
This is Joe Antone of
Centastage. Yeah. So that was great. One of those pinch me moments, like, is this really going to happen? Is it really going to happen? I've had multiple instances where a production was planned. One of the plays that's near and dear to my heart is a play called Concordance. It's a crazy, hallucinogenic 5 actors playing 22 characters in Scotland and London in the 1720s to 1780s. It's based on a true story, but it's really a nutty construct in a way that I find delightful. And there was a company that was planning to do it. They had hired the cast, they had the stage manager, it was on the website, they were all about ready to put tickets on sale, and the artistic director called me and said, so we're out of money. And the company is going to fold. So
that's the phone call you don't want to get.
That's the phone call you don't want to get.
Fortunately, don't call him with that phone call.
Yeah. Fortunately, I was on vacation and it was really relaxed. I was like, that's okay. I'm going to go to the beach in a little while. It'll be fun.
So to get to the point where you've gotten a phone call from artistic director saying, "Hey, why don't we do your play?" It's just a couple decades of being a positive presence in the the scene. I
think so, yeah. I think for Centastage, being a member of the group and working with Joe over the course of multiple years and getting a sense of, like, he had a sense of my work and I had a sense of him as a presence and how he worked with scripts. So that was a really happy sort of like coming together of stuff. Yeah, those phone calls and emails, and they're pretty wonderful to get. They are rare, but they're...
And we should give out your web presence for anyone who actually wants to look into you.
Yes, it's johnminigan.com, JohnMinigan.
All right. Well, John and Brandon, thank you for coming in and
Thank you.
Being on the podcast.
Great. Thank you, Greg.
The Queen of Sad Mischance was written by John Minigan. Kim was played by Elizabeth Reynolds. Beverly was played by Shaler Wright. Roy was played by Eric Michaelian. Stage directions were read by Kristen Rowe. Special thanks to Anne Flameng and The Depot for hosting our recording. Follow us on Twitter at BossPodPlay and on Facebook. Please rate us on iTunes or your podcast player of choice. You can support us on Patreon at BossPodPlay. Our theme was composed by Thomas Deus, thomasdeusmusic.com. Additional music by bensound.com. Other than yourself, do you know of a Boston area playwright who you'd like to be featured on the show? Let us know at bosspodplay@gmail.com.